Hey everyone! Ready to dive into a topic that's really makes you think. We're going to be tackling this idea of God appearing in a human-like form.
Oh yeah, this is something that's been debated for centuries.
To get to the bottom of this, we're going to be looking at this text, Undeniable Proof, God Revealed in Human Form, Biblical Truths. And it's pretty interesting because it challenges that traditional view of God as this invisible, formless being,
Right.
and instead looks at these biblical passages suggesting otherwise. So are you ready to kind of explore this together?
Absolutely. It's definitely a perspective that I think encourages us to look beyond, long-held beliefs and just kind of explore the many facets of God as depicted in these sacred writings.
Okay, great. Let's start with Genesis 1.26-27. It says, God created man in his own image. Now, that phrase, in his own image, has stirred up a lot of discussion. What does image actually mean here? Is it purely spiritual, or could it hint at a physical resemblance?
Yeah, that's a key question, right? One interpretation is symbolic. Image refers to our capacity for reason, morality, and a spiritual connection with God. We're like God in our ability to think, love, and connect with something greater than ourselves. But some argue for a more literal meaning. If we're made in God's image, shouldn't there be some resemblance, a shared form?
That's where things get really interesting, right? Because if you go with that literal interpretation, then you have to look at other parts of the Bible differently. Like, think about God walking in the Garden of Eden, talking to Adam and Eve, even resting on the seventh day.
Right? All these actions, walking, talking, resting, suggest some kind of physical presence, right? A form that could carry out these actions.
Exactly. And our source text kind of highlights this compelling example of Abraham's encounter with God in Genesis 18. God appears to Abraham as these three men. One of them is understood to be God. They eat, walk, talk, all very human actions. This kind of challenges that image of God as purely spirit, suggesting a God who chooses to engage with us in this really tangible way.
What's interesting is that this concept isn't limited to the Bible. The text introduces Kabir, who is this mystic poet and saint who's revered in a lot of Indian religions.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about that.
Well, some believe that Kabir is actually a manifestation of God in human form. It's kind of bridging this Eastern and Western religious thought. It offers this really unified view of God as both formless and possessing form.
So we're talking about a figure who potentially links different religious perspectives. Okay, that's definitely something to think about. I mean, that definitely expands our understanding with the divine. But how does this idea square with the traditional Christian doctrine of an invisible God without a physical body? How can we reconcile these seemingly opposing views within the same religious framework?
That's a core issue for sure. The New Testament also has these passages that could be interpreted as pointing to God having a physical presence. Take Jesus' post-resurrection appearances, which is a central belief in Christianity, right? He's seen in a recognizable human form after his crucifixion.
So are you suggesting that these appearances could be seen as God taking a form that his followers could understand and interact with?
It's one interpretation for sure. It's these alternative interpretations that really challenge traditional thinking and make this deep dive so captivating. They encourage us to question, our assumptions and explore this vast spectrum of possibilities within religious thought. Let's go back to Genesis, specifically the sixth day of creation. The text focuses on the significance of God creating both man and woman in his image.
Absolutely. What's the deeper meaning behind that choice? What does it tell us about God's nature?
It suggests this deliberate act of mirroring, right? If image is taken literally, it implies that God in some way shares our form, which raises these profound questions about God's nature and humanity's relationship with the divine. It's like God is saying, I'm making you to be like me, to reflect something of myself.
Yeah, that makes you think, doesn't it? And it kind of leads us to Jesus Christ. In Christian theology, he's often seen as God becoming human, the divine in human form. But even in the Bible, there's this distinction between Jesus and God, right?
Absolutely. There are many instances where Jesus actually refers to God as his Father, acknowledging a separation, a difference in their roles within the divine plan.
How can we reconcile this idea of Jesus being both divine yet distinct from God?
One way to look at it is that Jesus acts as this bridge between the two realms, a manifestation of God who takes on a human form to connect with us more personally. And this idea of a bridge between the divine and human, it connects beautifully with a passage from the Gospel of John. In John 16:7, Jesus talked about this future helper, an advocate who will come after him.
Oh, that's a really interesting point, because traditionally this helper is interpreted as the Holy Spirit. But our source text suggests it could also point to a future avatar, a divine messenger who will appear in a form similar to Jesus.
right? It's a possibility that really aligns with the idea of God continuously revealing himself to humanity in ways that we can understand.
Wow, this deep dive keeps opening up these new avenues of thought, but then our source throws in a concept that's not usually associated with Christianity at all, reincarnation.
Yeah, it's not a mainstream Christian belief.
Exactly. But the text points out these fascinating biblical passages that could be interpreted as hinting at reincarnation. For example, Jesus' comments about John the Baptist possibly being Elijah returned. Does this suggest that the concept of reincarnation might have a place within Christian thought, even if it's not widely accepted?
It's thought-provoking for sure. It challenges us to consider these different perspectives and interpretations, even those outside traditional boundaries. And this kind of brings us to one of the most central events in Christianity, Jesus' resurrection. While it's a cornerstone of the Christian faith, our source presents some alternative interpretations that are quite intriguing.
Yeah, what are some of these alternative interpretations?
Well, some argue that the resurrection wasn't a physical event in the traditional sense, but rather a spiritual appearance intended to reassure and inspire Jesus' followers, more of a vision or a spiritual manifestation than a literal bodily resurrection.
Okay, that's a unique perspective. And then the source goes on to suggest something truly unexpected, that Kabir was the one who appeared as Jesus after the crucifixion.
It's a bold theory for sure, the idea being that Kabir, as a manifestation of God, took on the form of Jesus to maintain the faith of early Christians and ensure the continuation of his teachings.
It's a fascinating idea. It kind of brings together several threads we've been exploring: God appearing in human form, the potential for these future avatars, and the possibility of spiritual beings taking on different appearances. This deep dive has challenged some of my own preconceived notions about God and the divine. It definitely makes you reconsider things.
I agree. Engaging with these complex concepts can be challenging but also incredibly rewarding. It pushes us to step outside our comfort zones and consider perspectives we might not have encountered otherwise.
Before we wrap things up, I wanted to touch on something else, that the source mentions the role of angels and spirits in Jesus' life. The Bible describes many instances where angels appear to guide and support him, even intervening at key moments. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, these accounts really highlight the interplay between the spiritual and physical realms, right? Suggesting that these divine beings actively participate in our world. It reminds us that there are forces at work beyond our understanding working behind the scenes.
It's both humbling and empowering, isn't it? But this deep dive has been a fascinating journey. We've explored so many different perspectives: the creation of humanity in God's image, the possibility of future avatars, and even that provocative suggestion that Kabir might have appeared as Jesus after the crucifixion.
Yeah, we've looked at biblical passages, theological arguments, even ventured into the realm of reincarnation, all to grapple with this question: can God manifest in a human-like form?
And it's a question with no easy answers. But even asking it, wrestling with these concepts, it expands of understanding of faith and spirituality. It reminds us that faith is not static. It's this dynamic journey of exploration and discovery. So much for a quick dip. This has taken us into some deep waters.
It certainly has. But I think our exploration of this topic is far from over. What are your thoughts on everything we've discussed so far?
Yeah, it really has been quite the journey after diving deep into all these different perspectives. What are your thoughts on the possibility of God manifesting in a human-like form? Does it challenge how you've traditionally viewed the divine? Maybe it even opens up new avenues for your own spiritual exploration. These are definitely questions worth pondering. And here's a final thought to leave you with something that our source material didn't explicitly mention, but I think it ties everything together beautifully. We've been exploring the idea of God potentially taking on a human form. But what about the reverse? What if, in a sense, we're meant to become more godlike ourselves?
Oh, wow. That's a compelling thought. What if the goal of our spiritual journey is to cultivate those qualities we often attribute to God? Love, compassion, wisdom, creativity. Perhaps by striving to embody these divine attributes, we're actually participating in this ongoing manifestation of God in the world.
That's a really powerful idea. So maybe the question isn't just, can God manifest in human form, but also, can humanity manifest the divine? It goes beyond theological debate and makes us think about how these ideas apply to our own lives.
Exactly. How can we embody the divine in our thoughts, words, and actions? How can we become these living expressions of God's love and grace in the world?
Those are questions we each have to answer for ourselves. What stands out to you from all this? This deep dive has certainly left me with a renewed sense of wonder and a deeper appreciation for the infinite possibilities at the heart of faith and spirituality. Keep exploring, everyone. The journey's just beginning.